Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Slidin into my DMs. Welcome, and I'm Colby, and with me I have, as always, some of my favorite people who are also occasionally dungeon masters for me. And so we have. Let's start with the dungeon mistress herself, Tori. Thanks for being here, Tori. And we have Preston. Oof, oh boy, my finger's not doing what I want it to. And back from his stint in Barovia, Mr. Rogers.
I found myself in a swamp. I went from Barovia to a swamp.
I mean, I don't know. Is that an upgrade or
a little bit? I mean, it's stinkier, but there's no straw. So I haven't run into Shrek yet. I'm sure he's in here.
Mm-hmm. I suppose I would take Shrek over Strahd if I had to choose.
He's way less deadly.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it depends on. Well, anyway, Preston, tell us about where are you located today?
This is the Malagith Mountains range. This is actually another one that I painted, not for this, but it was for a graphic novel. So
okay,
I figured it was appropriate for.
And now we're calling it campaign. Malagith Mountains. So for those who for those who don't know, we actually just recorded our session 0 for our upcoming campaign. We're super excited about. And it's a homebrew world. It's called an area that Corey has been working on. By the way, Corey, not here, not with us.
Does he get an explanation?
Dearly departed.
Apparently, yeah. I think.
Or is he dead again?
I think whatever patron he made, whatever deal he made, he must have broken. He got out of the chair. He was stuck in that chair, right? He got out of the chair and he was recalled. So hopefully he'll still be able to play the role of DM for us from, the nether world or wherever he's at. But anyway,
R.I.P. Corey.
This is
always miss you.
This is his homebrew world. It's called an area. And so we did this session 0 where we kind of mostly Corey just sort of explained all about the world, gave us a primer on it and everything like that. And we kind of introduced our characters to one another and everything. So we're super excited. Look for that to come out next week. We'll have the session 0 all edited and ready to go. And then the week after that will be episode 1 of our actual play sessions. So super excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, let's jump into to the things that I wanted to talk about with you guys today. So as usual, I've got a quick ruling question for you, and then a larger, longer sort of broody conversation. So for the quick ruling, here it is. This actually stems mostly from the spore. I've done a couple of builds where I've included spore druid levels. One was my first grappler build, which was a bit of a monstrosity, but you could find that here if you're interested in something crazy that may or may not be super viable in game as I built it. And then the other was the spore beast, which I think is maybe a little more reasonable of a character creation. Regardless, I've had comments on both of those about a particular aspect of the spore druid, and I wanted to get your guys' take on it. And as always, I'm going to ask for your interpretation of how this would work, rules as written, and then also how you would rule it in game. So the question is about the Halo of Spores feature that the spore druid gets at level 2. And I'm just going to read it to you first. So this is what it says. Halo of Spores, 2nd level Circle of Spores feature. You are surrounded by invisible necrotic spores that are harmless until you unleash them on a creature nearby. When a creature you can see moves into a space within 10 feet of you or starts its turn there, you can use your reaction to deal D4 necrotic damage to that creature unless it succeeds on a saving throw against your DC, right? Now, here's the important part. The necrotic damage increases to 1d6 at 6th level, 1d8 at 10th level, and 1d10 at 14th level. The question is this: does that damage increase at character level, or does it increase at druid level? I kind of brought this up in both videos, and to me, frankly, it's a little unclear. Some people are very convinced one way or the other as to how this should be interpreted. And I think, they've got good reason. But at the end of the day, it does not say Druid level, right? Now, the argument that a lot of people will make, and I think it's a valid one, is, as a general rule, here's how one commenter put it. As a general rule, class features scale with class levels, unless they say otherwise. Many, if not most, class features use the starting at nth level. They all scale with class levels, not character levels. Things that scale with character levels are proficiency bonus, spell slots, hit dice, cantrip damage, and racial features. This is not a cantrip, right? And so everything else scales with class level, even if it doesn't say when you take levels in this class or whatever. The reason why it's a little unclear to me is because, as far as I know, as far as I can think about, everywhere else where you have a feature that is supposed to scale with class levels says with class levels, right? And here it very much does not. It just says, again, I'll just quote it. It just says the necrotic damage increases to 1d6 at 6th level, 1d8 at 10th level, and 1d10 at 14th level. Maybe I'm being obtuse by saying it's unclear, and some people would probably make that argument and say, no, it's supposed to be Druid levels. It doesn't say Druid levels. And everywhere else that I see those kind of features, it says, levels in Warlock or whatever, right? So, the question, I suppose, is, did Wizards of the Coast just forget to add text here, including in indicating that it's supposed to be based on Druid levels? Are they just assuming that we know that? Or do they actually intend for it to scale with character level? And it was not a mistake on their part to not say Druid levels. So what's your interpretation? Rules as written and how you would roll it at your table. Who wants to start? Go.
I'll start.
Okay, Preston, take it away.
So I think rules as written, I think that the way that it's written is it doesn't specifically specify the actual class itself, but I think rules as written, I would lean towards that it would need to be the Druid's levels. Reason being is, like, for instance, some of those classes where, some of the other classes where if I want to get a benefit to that, I have to go and improve. As a rogue, for instance, I need to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to be able to get those benefits of that class specifically. And I feel like that rules as written, that's probably the same for this particular Halo of Spores. Now, that's not to say, for me, sometimes I feel like that the multi-classing in general is a little bit punishing for those who want to multi-class. And part of that is, how do you balance something with so many permutations? But I don't know, for rule of cool, like, because if someone's going into that class for something, for a specific reason, and they can come to me and say, hey, I really want to do this, but I also don't want to burn, I also want to do this other piece to make my character complete from like a story perspective, then I think I would probably be lenient on that rule, since it's not a hard and fast rule. But I feel like I think I'd lean towards that. Yes, it's probably Druid
intended
levels.
To be, at least intended to be Druid levels. All right, what do you think, Tori? Do you have a different opinion here?
I am on the same page as Preston on this one. Okay. I do think that because it is specifically speaking of something you gain as a second level Druid, that those additional levels are referring to the Druid classes you're leveling up. Like, if you looked at it from the opposite logic, right? Maybe your character is a level 9 character and you're taking 1 level dip in Druid for whatever. That doesn't mean you automatically get, Halo of Spores because you're past a second level character, you're on a 9th level character. That just doesn't make sense. So and at my table, I would probably do rules as written on this one.
Okay. Mr. Rogers?
I guess it's a boring, unanimous.
Oh, I knew I should have had Corey on this session.
Okay, here.
He'd have my back here. No, that's okay. That's okay. Mr. Rogers, lay it on me. Give it to me straight.
So yeah, they meant Druid levels, obviously. They just didn't put it
Obviously.
in
Then
the
why didn't they
text.
say Druid levels?
Because
Why
it's
didn't
so
they say
obvious
Druid
they
level?
didn't need to specify.
Then how come they
Oversight.
always say it everywhere else?
But
They
here's the
always
deal.
do.
It's fair. That's
If
fair.
you came to me and showed me that, I would look at that and go, you have ground to stand on because they didn't specify. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line we get a Jeremy Crawford ruling and he clarifies this.
I would
Or there might be
appreciate
one.
that.
He'll-
I've looked.
he'll
I can't
say-
find anything.
Yeah, I looked as well. I think he would say Druid level, but if he didn't,
Probably.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
I would be like, oh,
I'd be
okay,
pleasantly
well, the rules-
surprised for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rules say it. Because I've heard this before that like this specific rule always overrides the general rule, but this
Mhm.
doesn't get specific. So
Right.
I don't know.
I think for me, probably the reason why I want so badly for it to scale with character level is because I feel like the Spore Druid is a little underpowered. And
Yeah.
the more important feature, which is bonus damage per attack, is dependent upon temporary hit points, and those scale with Druid level already. And so it's so maybe it's a moot point because if you're going Spore Druid, you're going to take a lot
You're
of
gonna-
levels in Spore
right.
Druid, right?
Something.
But regardless, I just want I want there to be some leniency on something because it's like this character class already, this subclass already bugs me in that it sort of like shackles you to.
But he
to
seems like
the
such a fun
subclass.
guy.
But it's wow.
I'll take my anti-inspiration by.
Fortunately
Don't
for
come
you,
back.
I'm
We don't
not
like
a DM, so I never hand those out, inspiration or negative inspiration. No, that's fine, and I'm very willing to believe that the vast majority of my viewers are going to side with all of you guys here. So I'm probably very much in the minority, and that's okay. I don't mind being.
We'll still support you.
Thank you. I appreciate your support. So anyway,
We won't be the non-believer.
I'm going to make a call to Corey, who's not with us. If you can hear us from the nether regions, nether regions sounds like a place.
Yeah. I don't want to know what he's doing there.
Let's just say the nether regions is where you get the dankest swass on the field.
Yes, that's where our battle arena is. Nether region.
Right. So Corey, if you can hear us from the nether regions, leave us a comment and let me know if you take my side on this or if I'm outruled 4-1 and not just 3-1. Anyway, thank you for your interpretation. Okay, let's move on to the larger topic of conversation today, which is around what we do between game sessions, specifically how we can ways that we can kind of keep playing the game when we're not playing the game anymore. I think that this is probably not something that a lot of groups do. I could be wrong, but I think if so, there's a real missed opportunity for groups to role play sort of when they're not sitting down at a table together. And so for those that are maybe a little unfamiliar with the concept, I'll just explain kind of some things that we've done and then ask for your guys' opinion on, how you think we could maybe improve like our in-between session play, as it were. And the kinds of things that you might want to do potentially with kind of off-screen, away from the table role play and things like that. So, for us, we've actually set up just like a group chat essentially where in between sessions, a lot of the times we will do a little additional role play. It might be anything from sort of getting, our characters getting to know one another a little bit better, especially if it's like in like the beginning of a campaign, right? It might be like we end a session and we've got this long, like 2-week journey ahead of us from like point A to point B. And, not a lot's going to happen in game on the road, but like we kind of want to sort of flesh it out a little bit. Whether it's just, we're riding on horseback and having conversations with each other, or just, things like that.
Depth of conversation that sometimes can be difficult at the table.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, I guess what I'm wondering, what I'm curious about is your guys' thoughts on it. Why is it good? Why might it not be great? What kinds of things do you see this kind of serving a function for? What kind of gaps might it be able to fill? Tips and tricks to have a good sort of in between session role play experience. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. What are your thoughts? Right. Mr. Rogers, why don't you start us off?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I really enjoy it. I think it's super helpful for not only kind of fleshing out some of those moments that kind of get hand waved in a game or kind of just get skipped over, but it also helps with like my character development, helps me kind of slow down, and I'm not at the table like trying to hurry and think of something to say. I can sit and think of that, well, what would my character actually say here? What would he do? And I can type out a more eloquent response if I'm playing an eloquent character.
Sure.
So I enjoy that. The one like downside I've noticed, if there is a downside, is sometimes in the time it takes me to think of a response and type it up, the conversation moves and I'm like, oh no, we missed that spot. I'm still going to send it and you guys will just have to read it. Yeah. Just pretend it's
retcon it into earlier in the conversation.
Yeah. I think that would be my only downside of that.
Right. Like in addition to that, I think that if those conversations are happening and someone is like not available to be part of that in that moment, it's kind of a bummer because they miss out on their character being involved in that conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's not, we've always done, it's not like a set time that we're having these offline role play. Yeah. It's just like spur of the moment. And so for people who are busy or have something going on, it's kind of a bummer because they don't get to participate.
Yeah. What do you think, Preston?
I agree. I mean, I love those because especially for me, like whenever I'm playing a bard or something else and I want to say something that's like cool or whatever, and then it comes out as like, you got the Dakis Swass on the field, or like, you just kind of like, sometimes you just stumble and sometimes it works, but a lot of times it's just like, what did he say? I don't know. So I
imagine
really like
that I said something really cool.
Yeah, insert something cool here.
Yeah.
Especially when if like, for instance, if for me, I usually have a pretty playful personality just as me, and I know that if I'm playing someone who's serious, I have to try really hard not to interject or reflect that playfulness of myself into that character. And I think that like I really like it because it brings that like Dallin and Toribel said, it lets you slow down. You think about, okay, what would my character actually do in this situation? How would they respond? And giving a bit more of a deeper or more pensive response where you take a moment to really kind of emotionally wrap your head around it versus like the spur of the moment. Okay, I got to say something to keep things moving so I don't, either get steamrolled by someone else or forget, what I was saying entirely.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And I think at our table, at least, we only play like 2.5 hours. And
sometimes
so it
3.
feels, sometimes 3, but it feels kind of like, gosh, like, yes, I want to role play this, but I don't know if I want to dedicate 20% of our night to this one thing. Like, gosh, like, combat is really fun, and like this needs to be fleshed out, but like I'm torn here, I don't know what to do. And having that as an option to be like, well, we'll cover that in the chat,
especially when it's like you've got 100 XP to the next level up, and if we don't get RPXP from this, then we got to go kill something. Like, there's a barrel out there, let's go smash it.
That to me, it gets at why I guess my favorite thing about this sort of in between the session play is that so like when we were recording our session 0 yesterday, we were all, and you guys will see this next week, but we were all kind of introducing our characters to one another and sort of getting to know each other. But we were all sort of very like secretive and keeping things like close to the vest, right? And like, well, I don't really want to tell you much about my backstory, so like, I'm a humanoid and I'm female. The end. You know what I mean? And like, that's totally great and cool, and I love the idea of like sort of revealing and learning more about your character in game. But then my next thought, of course, was, man, we play 2.5-3 hour session. Like, if everybody is going to take time to sort of reveal their character, and like maybe we're all sitting around a campfire and getting to know one another and stuff like that, that's great for role play, but it also is going to eat up like the majority of the play session, and some people may be totally okay with that, right?
And it's not organic, though. I think you're trying to bottle it and be like, okay, this is your 30 minutes to talk about your character. And it's like, no, that's just not normal. Like, we need to let this happen as it would naturally happen,
right?
And whether that's in the game or on chat.
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, and this is not to say that there's anything wrong with those campaigns where everybody sits down and say, hey, my name's Gerald, I'm a rogue, I'm a half orc, I'm this tall, I have 3 sisters and brothers, my dad died. Like, there's nothing wrong with like level setting and coming into a campaign like that. But I think that's something that we found in this group that we all like, is we all enjoy storytelling. We all enjoy the element of the yes and I think that
well, I mean, you read any good story out there, and it's not like, all right, this is Kaladin Stormblessed, and his father's a surgeon.
Take a drink.
It like slowly tells that to you through backstory and then plot progression, and it kind of peels that back just layer by layer. It doesn't just like info dump on you and then say, all right, now
you get like a little bit the seeds at the beginning, and then that you get to reap that down the line when they're like, wait, what? Like that? Because
you can have plot culminating at the same time as character progression culminating, and that's just so sweet when that happens.
Right. And so, well, okay, so let's first talk about where you think it's appropriate, what kinds of things you think could do, and when to, at what points in a campaign. Is it something that you try and do weekly? Is it something that you try and do just like during certain times in a campaign? What are your thoughts?
I'll just jump right in. I think that for me, I would love for those conversations to happen on a weekly basis. It's so just fun and really kind of fills a void, I think, to have those conversations. And as far as when to have them, that's kind of tricky. I feel like a lot of our conversations when we've done this has been like the day after our session.
It's all fresh in our mind and we're all super excited about what just happened.
Right. But something that I love doing is going back and reading those conversations before we play again, because it helps it feel fresh. But it might be fun to have those conversations the day before you go to have your session, because it really helps you get into character and start to feel that person. Especially we all have our weird little things that we do to get in character, right? But
you should have seen me driving home today. I was just practicing voices. I'm literally narrating my drive home, trying to like get the inflections down. Like, this is a train. I'm going over train tracks.
But saying
like,
it in character.
People look at you like you're crazy. Yeah, I love it.
That's funny.
I do the same thing.
And I know it's hard because it does. You have to dedicate some time to doing that. But if your group is up for it, I think it'd be awesome to have part of that conversation the day after your session, and then a little bit more of it the day before your next one. I mean, that's a huge commitment, but I think it would really keep things fresh in your mind and keep the momentum going.
It satiates that like day before session itch. You're like, gosh, I really want to play, but I have to wait until tomorrow. But hey, if you can do the chat and kind of ease into it a little bit, that kind of scratches that itch.
Yeah, for sure. What about, I mean, I guess it seems to me like there's maybe more appropriate times for it to take place from a campaign perspective than others, right? So like, for example, if you end the session on a cliffhanger, like maybe you come around a corner and there's like a group of big bads and they're ready to attack you, and that's where we're going to end for tonight, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of like, that doesn't leave us a lot of space to like offline role play, here, where like it's like, okay, now we're all going to sit down and like share our backstories with one another, like right before this fight happens. Like, doesn't really make sense.
Flashback.
You definitely could have a flashback moment, though. That said, especially like if like Tori says, it's something that your group kind of wants to dedicate a little bit of time to every week. In those scenarios, you might have to like, be like, okay, for the role play session, this week we're just gonna have a flashback to moment X that we skipped over.
You could do something simple too, like where maybe this big bad that you run into and you turn the corner, maybe that's for whatever reason, maybe in your character's backstory as a kid, they're having a flashback and explaining to the group, hey, this person is the one that killed my entire village, and like at this point I'm basically like, what do you want to call it, like paralyzed, if you will, like you're just, so when we get into the game, if I'm acting funny, this is why, it's an intentional thing. It's not because I'm referring to last week. But
the big story moments you probably want to keep at your table.
Sure.
And so maybe instead of having a character chat for that week, it'd be more something kind of like a character exercise, where maybe the DM puts out a question like, how would your character feel if this happened? And it just kind of helps you get in the mind space. Like, well, tell me your character's worst date experience. And like, oh, I don't know, I never thought about that. You have to kind of, get into your character a little more. And so that way you're still kind of role playing a little
staying
bit,
engaged,
but it's not like skipping the important parts of the story, because you want that to happen with everybody in person, so you can roll that crit and everybody gets excited. You don't want to skip any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think a huge part for me of having those offline conversations is that character development. So I love that idea of just having a question that your DM poses. That's such a good idea, Dallin. I love that. Mr. Rogers. Dang it, I can never call you by your proper name.
You can do both. I think the secret's out.
The cat has long been out of the bag.
It's fine.
It's not even an Easter egg anymore. It's just
what it is.
My apologies, regardless. Well, I apologize to the Germans. I will now apologize to you.
That's perfect.
No need.
So, going back to what Dallin was saying a little bit about how keeping some of those story elements in the game, there were a couple of times, like for instance in the Bronze Battalion games that we were playing, where I was fully expecting you guys to go right and you went left, backwards, upside down that way. And for one of those particular ones was when Silmi had ended up killing what's her face. I had expected you to come in, there'd be a little conflict, maybe a fight, and then she gets out. But I'm like, okay, we'll let this play out, because actually after that, your Xanathar was going to basically reveal himself, and it was going to go a completely different direction. But then you were like, all right, we're going to shake him. And for me, that was very potent to take that conversation that at the table, we're already on like this adrenaline high of the fight and stuff. It would have been really hard to get into that somberness and end on that note. And so I think that those kind of situations, those kind of conversations, a lot of times if you use those as not using them as like a plot device or like a cliffhanger every time, but I felt like
just let it hang a little bit and breathe.
I like that. And just to give everyone a little insight here. So we were playing a campaign. There was a very important NPC that had been sort of, in my opinion, playing both sides, almost borderline double crossy a little bit on us. And I decided to attack her, and she ended up getting killed. And I think most of the group were a little bit like, we didn't really want to do that. And
I had your back.
Yes,
it is noted. I had your back.
And so
after he rolled a die,
the campaign ended like shortly thereafter, and we all kind of went home like, whoa, that was like kind of heavy, and nobody really anticipated. Frankly, I didn't even anticipate that happening. And so we kind of decided like, let's work through this, right? Like, because I don't want to wait.
There's a lot of emotion going on.
It's very potent right now. Yeah, exactly. And like,
we had character fights.
Yeah. There was definitely some in-game conflict, and it kind of led to one of our Sliding into my DM episodes about conflict, right? That I think was good, and frankly, I think made for great story. But anyway, that I think that's a perfect example though of like times where you could say, hey, like let's not let this get stale until next week.
No.
And also, like, this is going to take 30 or 40 minutes probably of like role play to kind of work through the emotions and the sort of, you know what I mean, like the conflict and then the resolution and stuff. And again, like, that's okay if you want to do that at your table. Like, absolutely, you should. And that's not to say that you can't do any role play at your table, and the role play should all be offline and only combat at the table or anything like that. But I think sometimes it is really nice to kind of say, let's take some time and like get in character here and kind of have a conversation about what just happened, and maybe find a little bit of some resolution and some character development, and have some great dialogue. And also, like Mr. Rogers was saying, like, give you time to actually think about what your character might say or do in this moment, and write it all out. And you know what I mean? It just feels like, for me too, like I feel like I'm a better role player if I can hit the pause button and kind of think about it and kind of, write it out and maybe edit some things and be like, okay, no, this is what I want my character to say. You know what I mean?
Ad-lib's hard.
Yeah. Other scenarios where you think this is applicable. One thing that came to my mind was leveling up, and this might be a completely different conversation, but it always strikes me as a little weird where when in game, like, you go from level 3 to level 4 and suddenly you're stronger, or you know what I mean?
I have
or
fireball
like,
now.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Or you learn a new spell, right? A more powerful spell. Or your warlock patron gives you some new ability, and everyone just kind of like, I think at most tables, including ours, frankly, we kind of just go, yeah, like, you're a higher level now, like, good job, you learned new spells. Like, isn't that a missed opportunity to potentially kind of go, well, how did you learn that, and what happened to your character to like increase their knowledge or training or power,
or if someone dips into like warlock, like suddenly having a grimoire or having something like that. I feel like that needs explanation.
Sure. But maybe it would be maybe it would take up too much camera time, as it were, or table time, if you were to, every single time you gained a level, go, okay, well, here's my character's training montage, and okay, well, here's my character's training montage. Like, but maybe that would be appropriate for like an offline type thing, right? Where you can kind of go, oh, that's cool and neat, and like, you had this neat interaction with your patron, or with your trainer, or with your god, or you know what I mean, something like that, where you learned and grew. And it doesn't necessarily have to take up time at the table.
I've always kind of thought of this as one spot we can improve on as like a group, on our table.
Agreed.
And so this time around, I purposely created my character with the intent that when he levels, like, it has to come with some sort of cost, almost not necessarily like we need to devote all this session time and derail everything, but like it's going to matter. Like, he's going to have to, there's a role play moment. Like, I'm going to have to study something. I'm going to have to unlock something, because I think it's weird. This isn't a video game where you're just like, okay, I got this much XP and now I can buy this skill point now and I'm good to go.
I'm at full HP.
Like,
I leveled up.
Like, especially because I'm playing a wizard, like, they're studious. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be spending time with my spell book unlocking something or coming up with some new theorem that didn't exist until now. I think that is a missed opportunity at our table, and I think the chat is a perfect place for that.
And it probably doesn't have to. I mean, this is something obviously that could take as much or as little effort and time on your part as you wanted to, right? It doesn't have to be a grand exposition, a 1,000-word, montage about things, something cool and unique and interesting and awesome and amazing that happens to your character every single time that they level up. But maybe even just a paragraph or two, put a little thought into it. I think would enhance sort of I guess the role play, your own feel for the character, how they got where they got and why, and all those kinds of things.
And perhaps like, since most of the time in campaigns you're leveling up together, maybe there's a chance to be like, oh, I taught you how to do this thing. Like if you're multi-classing into rogue, the rogue taught you something. And so now you have this chance at this cool RP where they're showing you how to pick locks or whatever.
Yep.
And I really like that idea of saying, hey, I'm getting this new thing from my patron. And because I've always felt like, at least with a lot of the warlocks at my table, with the exception of one, was I wanted to have more meaningful interactions between them and that
otherworldly being.
The otherworldly being. And I think that, there's some campaigns that you see online that do a really great job of that. And I'd love to see more of that kind of stuff where it's just like, hey, like there's that whispers, if to borrow the I guess the term from Critical Role or some of the other ones, where that specific person, maybe the DM has written this nice little story and he sends it to just that person. That's like, hey, here's your interaction with that patron. And you get that really cool moment. And then later, once everything comes to light, you can share that with the rest and they can enjoy it too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. I also think it will make it easier to play that next level up. I feel like a lot of times we'll come back from and we've leveled up last session and everyone's like, what did I do? Like, I can't remember.
It's been a week.
So I think if we if you make it a little more meaningful and there's a reason behind that, it will make you as a player, it'll help you remember those things that you're choosing to do as a character.
I agree.
Absolutely.
And not to circle back too far, but when we're talking about the offline conversations, I think another good place for this is resolving conflict. Again, I think you already linked that somewhere in the video. Sometimes as a player or as a DM, if you are actually emotionally invested in, like, let's say the rogue's stealing things from your bag and it's really actually pissing you off, like maybe it's not the best time to confront that at the table, because then, words might fly, you might say something you don't mean. And I think that in this format, it does, being able to take a breath, step back, say, okay, like, I get that they're doing this. They think they're being funny. It's really annoying me. How would my characters say this to them in a way that wouldn't ruin our friendship or mess with the,
Sure. If they're being a thief, you just obviously have to chop off their hand.
Obviously.
Fingernail by fingernail.
What?
Okay. No fingernails.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Let's talk then about maybe suggestions for making this work well for everybody. My thought, and as we've been talking about it thus far, is to kind of do it in written format and text format. That's not the only way to do it, obviously, but what are your guys' thoughts on maybe guiding a group who wants to kind of suggest this to their table and try and start it up in a way that works best for everybody?
Use a platform that everybody's on. That would be what I would start with.
Yeah,
technology.
Text or chat, email.
Because if it's something that they never checked to begin with, or if it's a platform they're not familiar with, then it's probably a format that they're not going to see as easily as something else.
So just because you really love Slack doesn't mean that everybody else wants to download and install it and now have one more software to monitor on their phone and or their computer.
Yep.
Okay. What else?
I also like the idea of having it be something that is like that you can go back and look at. Like text, for example, for me, my text like auto delete after so long because I choose to do that, because otherwise my phone gets just filled up with texts. And so I love being able to go back to something that happened, several months ago, and I can go and read it again. That's important to me.
If it has threading, I find that might be helpful in some of those cases where, because the one thing that I have a hard time with in the current format is that if it is a long running conversation, trying to be like, okay, there's this one specific conversation we had. You got to scroll, read, scroll, read, especially if it's like.
And then someone comments while you're doing that, and it pops you back down to the bottom.
Yeah, it pulls you down to the bottom. You're like, ah. Yeah. So if there's some kind of threading in there, I think that helps a little bit.
Yeah. So maybe
it just depends on the organization of the group.
A system where you're maybe like saying, okay, here's our sort of RP chat group. but by date, maybe like group them by date, and you can say, here's the group for this date, this date, this date, etc.
Yeah, or if it's like Teams Hangouts, or I think Google has a new Slack competitor chat. Like if you go in there and either creating the new chat, that would be probably the simplest one, but some way to be able to say, as the DM, I'm going to spin up this chat that's specific to this thing that's happening, and try and only keep conversations relating to the in character chat to that. And then that way, you don't have to sift through a conversation about what's going on in politics or whatever else in that thread. You can get what you need and be able to find it easier.
I mean, there's definitely alternatives to chat if somebody is more interested in having sort of like a more interaction. I mean, obviously a format like this, like a Zoom thing or like a Discord, Teams, Discord would work for sure. I think also like Marco Polo, or something like that, where you could just record a message to the group and send it, and then somebody else could watch it and then like think, okay, how would my character reply to this, and give it a minute and be like, okay, I think I know what I want to say, and like ding, and then record that.
I'd be really curious to know if anyone watching or anyone in the chat has a solution for the because if you do have that situation where Dallin, like if I'm doing a long-winded reply and it's like, okay, this is perfect, I've got it just right, and the conversations jump forward 3, or even I'd be interested in suggestions on, like, in particular towards our new campaign that we're trying to do. If we do any of that kind of offline stuff, obviously no one else, it's going to be lost. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to be something that is easily shareable in that format, especially if someone just wants to consume the video or the podcast or whatever else.
Well, I think we have a solution for that.
I think we have a solution.
We're gonna do some recapping or something like that.
Oh, really?
Kind of tie in some of our offline
RP as well as previously on, kind of couple that together.
Yeah. So
But yeah, I think that's a good point. Preston, what about like timing? Is that something that you need to be majorly concerned about? Tori, you kind of expressed earlier that can be a frustration, right? Where like if it's just not a great time for you and your phone's like going crazy because everybody's like having all of this, RP interaction, you're like, I'm in the middle of something and you can't get to it, then that can be kind of a bummer.
I'm watching my programs. By programs, I mean children.
Yes. We call them programs. They're they're all little automatons.
Have troubles all the time. I think that just established with the group, like, is there a time of day, first of all, that is most convenient for everyone?
Yeah.
And go from there. Is there a day of the week that's bad for anyone? I think we all kind of have most people. No, I shouldn't say that because I don't know. For me, I have a pretty set like schedule, right? Like this is the time I wake up in the morning. This is the time I do this, and so on and so forth. And I know on these days of the week that I have this going on. So it's easy to kind of, I guess, forecast what could potentially be a good time.
Right. And the nice thing about, something like this, whether it be in sort of text format or like a recorded video format or whatever, is that it does allow some flexibility, right? It's not as demanding of your time and attention necessarily as like a full sitting down at the table play session would. And so, it's okay if there's a little delay, you can take, if you're in the middle of something, I'll get to that in a few minutes or in an hour or two or whatever the case may be, and still be able to participate some.
If it's something you really know you want to comment on, but like you're busy, I mean, just like, hold on, don't go. Like, I'm going to say something right here. Give me 10 minutes.
Sure,
like,
sure.
Or
retcon, or
just
and just be like, hey, after character X said this, like my response would have been Y. And I think we're all smart enough to be able to go, okay, yeah, I can fit that in my brain, like, and make the conversation make sense, take it from here.
And I think that with that, as a DM, that's kind of what your role is. Pause for a second.
I will pause it, but I'm definitely leaving the look in.
In the DM conversation, saying something where it's basically like, as you guys are doing this, what is so and so doing? You know, like giving a prompt, and if that person says, "Hey, I'm super busy right now," but then just like use that as a place marker of, "Hey, they're going to be able to come back in and say, hey, here's what's this." But if you do have somebody who's like, "Okay, this is what's going on, this is what's going on, this is what's going on," and they're going left, and then the rest of the party's sitting over here, you know, being able to say, "Okay, that's going on. What's happening over here? Like, what is the reaction? What is your these party members, what is how is that affecting you?"
Right.
Not to mention too, if the conversation's involving an NPC, like now the DM's got to be involved with that too. So
for sure.
It isn't necessarily just in character,
correct,
you know, role play. It could be NPCs are involved or whatever. So.
Yeah, I like it. Okay. Any other I don't know, tips, tricks, advice, things that you guys want to mention, favorite moments from our own experience with this?
Do what your character would do, and then send an apology in a separate chat to the person and be like, "That was my character. I love you so much. I didn't mean that. I want to kill your grandma. That's just what my character said."
Yeah, I like it. No, you know what? It's good. I think we do a pretty good job of kind of we have a separate channel for our between session role play, and whenever we talk in that channel, we are speaking as our character, unless we put like the double parentheses around it to indicate this is out of character chat, right?
Yeah.
So that people know, okay, this is Colby saying something now, but otherwise it's my character talking. And so, yeah, you can either private message them or double parentheses, "I love you so much. I promise, like, you know, this isn't personal. This is just, you know, for the sake of the story. I think this is kind of how we ought to play this out," whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I don't know that we necessarily do, but I think it could be also interesting if, as a DM, if you feel like, hey, this is a conversation that's happening to them, and you want to help keep that story fresh and moving along, maybe that's an appropriate time to send a quick handout, like it's a picture of something like, "Hey, you see this?" You know, as the session's about to start, or like that morning before the session's going to begin, sending out something that says, "Hey, you know, like as you guys went to bed last night, you woke up, and when we're going to start, you know, the fire's crackling, and there's this mysterious stranger sitting at the what have you, and he's holding this writ, and as soon as he hands it to you, he disappears and turns to Tony Stark.
And here's the writ.
And here's the writ." Yeah, or like it could be fun for those kind of things. So that way, not everything has to be like those it's a little bit of railroading, but it keeps it
at the beginning.
It kind of cuts it down a little.
I think if nothing else, especially for those who have maybe limited playtime, this can be a really great tool to kind of keep things moving quickly during your actual session. And again, not to take away from the importance and value and fun of role playing at the table, right? Because that's great. But I guess it just allows for more role play. And like, you know, all of you guys have kind of talked about, for me, I love that it scratches that itch of like, I want to play D&D all the time, every day, but I can't, right? And so it's nice to just have something middle, you know, 3-4 days after the session, a couple of days before the session, the next session, just to be like, oh, like, you know, just, it scratches that itch. Yeah. It's great. Tori.
I was just going to share, you asked for like a favorite moment that we've had outside of chat. And it just made me think of when we finished our Browns Battalion campaign, we had this big spectacular ending where we fought a dragon and saved Corey's character. His long lost love had been held up in this fortress, and he
killed the dragon and saved the princess. Yes,
basically. It's so basic.
No, it was awesome. It was more than that.
If he played female, then he would have saved his male character.
Yes, or obviously
another female. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. But he wrote this most beautiful kind of a summary of what his character did to go and find his love. And I messaged him after I read it. I was like, "Corey, there are actual tears streaming down my face." Like, it was so beautiful. And it's something that it was just so eloquently written. And it was something that I don't think we could have it would be hard to formulate those thoughts and feelings and words like in an instant in game.
Mhm.
And so it was just a really beautiful kind of wrapped everything up. And I just was really appreciative that we had that outlet to get to hear his perspective on it.
It was a fantastic epilogue that we just didn't have time to get to at the table. Well, as always, thanks. Thanks to the listeners, of course. Appreciate you guys. And I would love to hear, your own thoughts on the subject, of course, and, what you guys do to play when you're not playing. If you do anything or advice that you guys may have, favorite moments for sure would be great. And how you handle leveling up in your game too. That's really interesting to me. If you do anything other than just go ding, okay, like I have more spells or whatever, which is fine if that's how you want to do it. No judgment here. But thanks, of course, to my DMs. You guys are awesome. And I always appreciate your input and your wisdom. So yeah. That's the show for the day. Thanks, everybody. Love you guys. Hope you have a fantastic day, and we will talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.